Hi everyone, I'm Vikki and I am the founder and head coach of Momentum Life Coaching, and I'm so excited to be chatting about my topic this week, which is all surrounded around the power of our language, the words that we use. And there's three particular areas that I want to look at. First of all, I want us to look at the impact of the words we use on a day-to-day basis. Then I want us to look at perhaps the interpretation or the meaning we give words. And the last one will be the history. How have these words played out through our entire life? So let's start with number one, the impact of our words and what it can actually do for us. I want us to start to think of your words almost like the same way in which you would choose the clothes that you wear and your personal wardrobe. Think of it as a word wardrobe, if you like, and that is a tongue twister, I can tell you now. So I want you to think about how the words you use shape the way you feel, how others perceive us then, and ultimately how we then envision the world around us. Because so often the words we use then become the reality of what we then see, notice, and feel. But unlike our clothes, where we would be changing them up or buying new ones or trying something in the new season, we often stick with the exact same words over and over again. And perhaps they don't yet fit us really well, or maybe they have started to fade and become a little bit old and lifeless, and yet we still keep wearing them. Why is it that we can update our wardrobe so much, but yet we don't consider the language we use on a day-to-day basis? Now, what we need to start to figure out is, like our clothes, you might look at them and go, that's a little bit old now, that one's got a hole in it, that one doesn't fit me so much anymore, that one no longer is part of the way I feel or how I want to represent myself. You would ask those questions about the clothes in your wardrobe. I want to challenge you to actually ask those questions in the words you use. Are those words fitting you still? Do they still represent who you want to be? Are they a good match in creating who you are? Because when you think about the words that we constantly are stringing together and talking about and creating, let's imagine them as the fabric to who you are. And so imagine that you're repeatedly telling yourself, I'm stressed, I'm busy, my day was so full on. Common words that we hear all the time. And I myself have used it constantly. The more we are describing our day, our life as busy, stressed, a lot to do, you actually are increasing your cortisol levels. And when your cortisol levels increase, you flood the stress hormone into your body. And so your whole mind turns into survival mode. Rather than it just being that you are being productive and getting through your day, you actually turn yourself into overwhelm. And that is the impact of our words, because when we hear stressed and busy and frustrated or overworked, it does immediately give us that sense of there is a lot happening and we're getting overwhelmed and maybe it's too big for us. And suddenly the ability to cope in those situations becomes less. So it's something to ask yourself, is the words that I'm using, like busy and stressed, actually empowering me, or is it actually aiding or supporting my sense of feeling overwhelmed? Because if you could change it to, I'm being really focused today, I've had such a productive week, you will actually find that you will increase the hormones that will give you energy and vitality and enjoyment. Although you're still doing the same thing, you now have it with a different lens, purely because you've changed your language and then the meaning you give it. So I want you to consider, if busy and stressed is a wardrobe of words that you are constantly using, ask yourself, is it time to change it and get something new to wear? Maybe focused and productive could be your words too. So let's now take a look at our second pillar, which is the interpretation that we give to our words. So now we're having a look at the interpretation of those words now. I want you to think about the fact that if someone had to belittle you, berate you, or say something very negative in a completely different language, you would have no clue what they were saying. You might actually consider that they were complimenting you, maybe, because of the way the language sounded. This is the interesting and fascinating thing about the interpretation. So not only do we choose the language that we use constantly, but we also choose how we want to interpret it. I love that saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Well, in actual fact, words can harm you only if you give them a meaning. And that's the big thing. They need to have a meaning first. So I want you to think, maybe someone has said to someone else, oh, you're so ambitious, or you're very hyperactive. And to someone that might be a really good compliment. They think, yes, I am ambitious, I am hyperactive because I love to get really active in my work. Where someone else might consider it to be a little bit more negative or not exactly a great outcome for them. Why is it? So this is often because we've interpreted in our own representation the way in which a word feels, sounds, and how we want to understand it. So the interpretations of our word is based on the experience we've had in our lives and the belief systems we hold. So if in your family ambition was seen as maybe a selfish image and ambitious people seemed very self-centered, of course then when you hear the word ambitious, you are not going to feel the same way about it as someone else who's learned the word ambition is drive and enthusiasm and courage to try something new. They would have completely different meanings. So I want you to consider that the interpretation you have of the words around you, is it an accurate representation? Or perhaps have you taken a view on the background of maybe past experiences or beliefs that you've had from your parents or your siblings or your friends, and now you have the power to choose whether you want to accept that interpretation or whether you actually want to change it. And that's quite an empowering thing to be able to do for yourself, because you can then completely change the way in which you feel about yourself in body image, about how you feel about yourself when it comes to your work and your career or your decisions in life, to have kids, not have kids, to live in a house, to not live in a house, whatever you choose to do. The third pillar is looking at the history of our language. I want you to consider that all the language we use has been created through our upbringing, through what we've heard repeated to us over and over again. So maybe you've constantly heard the phrase, life is really hard. You need to sacrifice in order to be successful. You must work hard in order to achieve anything. Never give anything up easily. Maybe there's different phrases that you've always listened to, and now it's become an integral part of actually your own internal conversation. I know living and growing up in South Africa, we always were under this impression that you must fight for everything in order to achieve it. And I so often see now living in Australia that this internal fight is always there, that I get triggered in situations where it's not necessary. I don't need to fight in order to show someone I'm worthy. I can just be there and I can respond in a more calm way. And so this is just an example of how an internal language that has been brought up through my own family, through my own circumstances, has then created something that I do and the way in which I interpret situations. I'll end up fighting for something and being overreactive rather than just being able to listen, understand, and see it more clearly, because the internal dialogue that I have has come from a history of needing to fight. So that's an example of how it can happen. What is the greatest gift you can give yourself is to actually say to yourself, is that current framing, wording, and language necessary now? Is it something from my past that we had because my life was completely different, because I was in a situation in which the country wasn't stable? Or actually, is it an opportunity where you can then go, I no longer live there, or I'm no longer in that same condition. I've had many years of experience to now understand better. Am I allowed to drop that language? I can probably guarantee that the answer out of that would be 100% yes for a lot of us when there is an internal language that's no longer serving us. And all you need to do is give yourself permission to recognize when that language is coming up and say to yourself, is it worthy anymore? Does it need to be there? Because then you can shift it to something that serves you better. So it's actually not about needing to fight now, but it's having the ability to know what's important to me, what is going to help me achieve those results, or what I need to do to get the best out of a situation. I can see it more as a proactive behavior rather than a need to fight for my survival. I hope these things have given you some insights into how the power of our language really shifts and changes how you perceive and notice the world. Check in on your word wardrobe. Is it creative enough, and does it fill you with the excitement and incredible joy that you deserve? Is your language maybe a little bit stale and that you've been saying the same things repeatedly over and over again? Have you then become aware of the meaning that you give your words? Do things mean more to you than they probably should? And lastly, are you carrying a history of language that no longer serves you? Give yourself permission to answer these questions, to reflect on them, and you'll suddenly notice a complete change in your language and the freeing liberation it will give you once your language is more aligned to yourself. Bye for now.